All right, so let's work through some problems. Starting from the beginning, which seems like a pretty good place to start. Which job would you expect to pay the least? Let's work through each one of these. A not fun, high-risk job. Let's consider supply, and let's consider demand. So in most of these, demand's really not the issue. I'm trying to focus on supply. So supply is not very fun, so it's a low supply probably. Nobody wants to do not fun jobs. And high risk job, not everybody has an appetite for risk. So we have low supply and in both cases here. How about a fun, low risk job? Again, focusing on supply, we are going to be thinking about maybe supply is up for being fun, and maybe supply is up for being low risk. A fun, high-risk job, supply is up for the fun part, but for the risk part, maybe supply not so much. And then a not fun, low-risk job, supply would be low for the not fun, but higher for the low risk. So in all these cases, which gives you the most likely case for paying the least, it's going to be a situation where the supply is the highest. Because if you've got a wage that starts out here, the price of labor or the wage, right, is here, and then you have the supply curve that's the furthest to the right, that's going to give you the lowest wage. So the answer should be whatever gives you the most supply. B. All right, so using that framework, let's do some more. All right, so we're looking for wage and quantity of coal miners, and we want to think about how each of these reflects coal mining. So equilibrium wages, price of oil is the thing that's rising. All right, so let's just graph it right here. So how are oil and coal related? Well, let's see what we say. You probably need to sketch a supply and demand for your answer. So the assumption is that coal and oil are alternate fuels. They're substitutes for each other. So what does that mean? If the price of oil rises, people are going to buy less oil and probably therefore buy more coal. So as you buy more coal, what happens is that the price of coal will rise, right? As demand rises for coal, and therefore we need more coal workers. So demand should increase for coal miners. So starting from a wage here, right? The price of labor, the wage, and quantity here, we can get a new demand curve that is increased, reflecting this increase in demand for coal workers or coal miners, and the wage should go up, and the quantity also goes up. So which answer is that? Wage rises and quantity falls. No. Wage falls, quantity hired falls. So we want wage rises and quantity of workers hired rises. All right, moving on. So this is kind of the pattern you want to use. Think about, is it a demand issue, a supply issue? We've talked about sort of the factors in the demand for labor, and you can logic through the supply of labor. New coal mining equipment is invented that is cheap and requires few workers to run. So it looks like our workers are going to be losing their jobs because machines are now doing the job, which is actually true in coal mining in the U.S. So we would probably see just the result, the exact opposite of the last question. So the price of labor, quantity of labor, nothing's happening to supply, it's on the demand side. Because it's, the demand for the product that the workers are making. And so we see a demand drop. If the wage started out here, then we would expect it to drop as the demand drops. So the answer will be wage falls and quantity hired falls. This next question is a supply side question. So several major companies that do not mine coal open factories in West Virginia and offering lots of well-paid jobs. So we're going to see workers probably flock to those jobs, or at least some of them will leave. And we've had the situation as coal mining jobs were leaving the U.S. because of technological improvements and machines that can now mine the coal. Some foreign companies were coming in and retraining American workers to do solar production, but turns out those companies were Chinese related, and with the new trade war with China, that's sort of falling apart. So, but we start out with this wage, this quantity, and then as workers leave this particular market, supply shifts to the left of workers in coal mining because they're going off to greener pastures, if you will. Wage rate rises and quantity drops. So that looks like A. This next one may have given some of you a headache. So I apologize if that's true, but this is one of those real-world gray area situations. So we have costly new regulations to make coal mining a safer job. Is this a supply or demand side issue? Clearly, it's a supply side issue if we go with the idea that workers prefer other things equal safer jobs. So we would have initial supply and demand giving us an initial wage, and then probably we could argue that the supply of workers would increase because you're less likely to lose your life or develop lung disease or what have you. And so that has a downward pressure on wages. However, the question described costly new regulations. So these new regulations may decrease the profitability of the firm. If they decrease the profitability of the firm, and especially if they put the burden on workers so that hiring workers is more costly, firms may decide to produce less, or they may decide to switch from workers to machines if that's an option. So it's possible that if they are able to switch out of workers, that you would see a drop in demand for workers. So what's clear for sure, if you either just shifted the supply or if you shifted the supply and the demand, is that wages will drop compared to where they were. What's not clear is whether the quantity will be the same or different. So in this case, I would argue that you could probably answer either, you need wages to fall, and quantity of workers may increase or stay the same. Probably we're not going to say falls. There's nothing in the question that would lead us to a drop in workers unless the leftward shift in demand is very, very large compared to the rightward shift in supply. All right, so this next one ties directly to the demand for labor, and the demand for labor, as you remember, is the value of the marginal product of labor, or also called the marginal revenue product. But basically, it's the price of the output times the quantity that the next worker makes, right? So it's this is total revenue, and the value of the marginal product is the change in total revenue when you increase the amount of workers. by 1. So we're looking for what will decrease a firm's demand for labor. Firms demand less labor if it becomes less profitable to use a worker. So if the worker's wage goes up, they're less likely to be wanted. If the value of the widgets that the worker makes drops, that also means that the worker, through no fault of her own, is now less profitable for the firm, right? Because total revenue is based on the price of the output times the quantity that the worker makes. So if the worker, if the widgets that we make are dropping in price, this by definition has to drop in price, and this will drop in value. So that means that E is the correct answer. A decrease in supply of labor will have nothing to do with the firm's demand. An increase in the price of the firm's product would actually go the opposite direction and make the firm want to hire more, because suddenly society wants more of this good and it's more profitable to make this good, and so it makes sense to hire more. And increase in the wages of workers, again, that just means that fewer workers will make the cut of earning enough to cover their cost or their wage rate. So D is the correct answer. And on that theme of hiring more workers, how many should we hire? We're always comparing the cost or the wage rate to the marginal revenue product or the value of the marginal product. So we have the wage is 10 and the value of the marginal product is here 12. So the worker earns $12, only costs $10. They add $2 to profit. So the firm increases profit if they hire this worker. Arguing that increasing taxes on the rich causes people to stop working assumes that the substitution effect outweighs the income effect. In other words, let's use blue. If you have a labor supply curve, and we don't need to graph the labor demand because nothing in this question is about that. This question basically assumes that if you tax my income and I work less, it must be the case, right? So if my wage goes from here to here because you've taxed me more, my take-home pay drops, and I reduce my quantity of labor supplied, it must be that the labor supply curve is upward sloping, and I am more inclined to substitute leisure for work when you drop my wage. And likewise, if you were to increase my wage, I would work more because I would substitute more work for leisure because leisure has gotten more expensive when the wage rises. So people that make that assumption basically assume that people don't value leisure that much, or they're not at a high enough wage to value the leisure. So they ignore the income effect. All right. An increase in free trade with Canada and Mexico causes U.S. pharmaceutical prices to drop. We've seen this story before. We've got a drop in the price of widgets, and widget workers are therefore less profitable, and the demand for them drops. No different here, but we've got pharmaceuticals. So the price of labor, quantity of labor, we would expect that it's now less profitable to hire workers in the pharmaceutical industry because the value of what they're making has just dropped. So their contribution, the revenue generation that they're responsible for, has to drop. So it's a demand side issue because the demand for pharmaceutical workers is derived from the demand for pharmaceuticals. And finally, new and cheap technology increases mine safety. Notice here, keyword is cheap. It's not going to necessarily cost the firms a whole lot, so we can focus then simply on the supply issue. So labor supply, we know people like safety in general. We don't go to work to die, or we don't expect to die at work. most of us, and so that means your supply curve should shift to the right when it's less dangerous to do this job. And if that's the only thing happening, wage rate drops. There you have it.